I want to get right into the topic for today. I want to introduce our guests as well. The topic is all about QXscore. Now, if you have not heard of QXscore or it's not something that's super familiar to you, that's great. That's why you're here, right? We're going to go all through what the QXscore is all about, how you can actually measure product performance through a UX lens, and we'll talk about the relationship between UX success and product metrics, so you can actually demonstrate business impact. That's what today is all about. And to talk through all of that with us, I have two special guests. I have Chris Schmidt, a global account director at UserTesting, and I have Lucas Lemasters, a UX research principal at American Airlines. And they're going to take us through all of this. And so actually what I'm going to do, first of all, Chris and Lucas, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I know this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to turn my camera off because I'm going to leave things to you two, but I'm going to come back on towards the end and facilitate some questions. I'm sure I'll have some questions of my own. I'm sure our guests will have some questions. But Chris and Lucas, I'd love for you to take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much, Mike, for helping put all of this on. I'm really excited about today's conversation and something that I'm deeply passionate about. So just as Mike had mentioned, you have Lucas and myself here. Just a little bit of background on me. I come from UserTesting. I've been here for almost a decade working with well over, I think, around 450 different enterprise organizations, helping kind of define and build our partnership and define some of their digital strategy. Lucas, if you want to say hi.
For sure, yeah. So I am the UX research principal at American Airlines. I've been here for almost 7 years now. And so I play a big role in kind of managing our UX research process and standards and tools, including user testing, and kind of making sure that we're all conducting great research for our products.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about for you today, Lucas, is Lucas has really kind of helped pioneer a lot of the QXscore programs at American Airlines and has had a lot of successes that he'll be able to share and talk a little bit about today. So just to give everyone a bit of a sense, first things first, we're going to talk a little bit about what is QXscore in the first place, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can leverage the QXscore to change the way that products are developed. I think there's a lot of really great benefit there. Lucas will share some of his stories and how he's been able to successfully implement change within the programs at American Airlines. And obviously, one of the most important things when we talk about product and UX is really making sure that we can show ROI. So again, sharing some stories around how we can actually drive all of this back to one of the most important things, which is how do we keep our business running through ROI? And then we'll open it up for some questions at the end. So to get started, just to give you a sense of what QXscore is. So QXscore is a metric that obviously UserZoom and UserTesting merged together early last year. QXscore is something that we developed about 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the things that we found so often with the organizations that we partnered and worked with is that there tends to be a lack of kind of a complete picture into what's going on within the digital experience. I've worked with organizations in the past where they were really, really adamant that NPS was the single and only metric that they cared about, right? And what we found a lot of times is as they were going through their digital product development and in that product development lifecycle, they were running research and they were finding really, really high NPS scores, but nobody could actually use the product, right? That didn't have the utility or the usability that we were looking for. And so on the flip side, right, we can find that people can use a platform or use an experience relatively easily, but it might not have the utility, right? It might not be something that they actually want to use or would use regularly. And so what we're able to do is using measures that are available on the platforms is combine both of those sides, right? So we're able to capture that success and we're able to capture how they felt about those experiences and combine it into a single metric that really created a comprehensive view into how users are experiencing or interacting with those digital experiences. And we're going to talk a lot today about how we can actually use that for a number of different things within the PDLC, and including ROI. So again, I've worked with a lot of organizations over the last decade or so with user testing, and think this is a pretty common experience that we see in a lot of organizations, which is somewhere in the midst of introducing new products or designs or bringing something new to market or even just refreshing experiences. We find that a lot of times it's usually one or two people that are kind of coming in. I'm sure you've already all been familiar with that story of some executive's niece or nephew had some kind of experience with the digital storefront within an organization. All of a sudden, we're putting all these programs in where that becomes a key kind of project that we all start working on. And so a lot of organizations, we see this pretty consistently, which is organizations want to go and deliver a better digital experience and better experiences for their users and customers. But we see the customers are missing throughout that entire journey. And so we see here, we start to build out these, what are we going to build? How are we going to build it? And a lot of times, again, it's usually built on assumptions or maybe parts of the data. We go into the design phase where we actually are building out prototypes. And again, a lot of times there are too many assumptions or not enough customer data to come in and actually make an influence on what we're developing. And then maybe we'll do a little bit of QA. But most often what ends up happening is that organizations don't actually know the successes that they're going to have with that new product or maybe an updated product until you actually go live and you spend all of that time actually developing the product. And then we find out if it's going to work or not. And so really today, what we're focusing on, and we're seeing a lot of organizations, American Airlines and Lucas are doing an exceptional job of this, is flipping the script, right? So as I mentioned, right, the further down that product development lifecycle you go, it becomes a lot more costly to go and make changes and to make fixes and to go in and go back and make the improvements that you actually needed to. And so again, as we start to go through that ideation and design phase, it's relatively cheap and inexpensive to go and pivot and to make an adjustment. But once we start to develop that actual interaction or that experience from the design and turning it into something tangible and real, usually the cost is about 10x the cost in design. And once we've actually launched it and we've shipped it and we've sent to market, plenty of articles out there suggest up to and more than 100 times the initial cost of designing it. And so again, with the QXscore and some of the programs and process that we're talking about today, we really want to challenge everyone here and kind of open it up to discussion around how can we flip that script using QXscore as a measure that gives you a lot of data that you get from analytics and bringing those data points up to design where it becomes really cost efficient and really easy to make sure that you're pivoting and building the right thing the first time. And so again, Lucas has an amazing story today, and wanted to pass it over to Lucas to kind of talk about some of your experiences and some of the values and benefits that you've seen as you've gone through this journey.
Definitely. So as Chris was saying, one of the big benefits of QXscore is that, it's, with traditional metrics like from Adobe or Quantum Metric, they're giving you kind of what's happening, but it's not necessarily giving you kind of why it's happening. And with the QXscore, you're kind of understanding what's kind of happening and why it's happening based off of both that behavioral and attitudinal components. And then as we'll kind of dive into today, once you pair that with those quantitative analytics that you get, you could really start to tell a really compelling story and start to build more of an attribution model for ROI. But some other kind of benefits of the QXscore is that it's just super simple and clear. And traditionally, like, you might find yourself running a lot of usability tests or like tactical tests for a product. And yes, you're presenting these results to stakeholders and they're shaking their head and all is good, but it feels isolated. You kind of do one at a time. And at the end, you're like, yeah, we took all these steps and we launched the product and we're going to go use our analytics to kind of measure it. But we kind of need a better vision for those usability tests. What are we trying to work towards? And that's where QXscore has been really helpful with us, in that we could benchmark a flow, understand its score in a simple terms, and then work to improve that score over time. And so especially with executive leadership, it's really easy to say, hey, our score is a 75. We want to get out an 80, right? And so it kind of gives this North Star to link all of your usability tests together and kind of create that baseline. And then once you kind of do create that baseline, you can use it as a diagnostic tool. So you can go in and see what the low points are and work with your stakeholders to address those low points and try to boost the score. And this just provides a whole new layer of focus of really where are your customers struggling and where can you focus your time to try and improve the scores. And so this is where we kind of start to dive into like the different tiers of the QX score, right? So at a foundational or diagnostic level on the beginning, this is really where you want to start to like build in a regular program. So for us, what this kind of looks like is identifying some of your major flows in your company or your business. So at American Airlines, this was, buying a flight, changing or managing a flight, enrolling in our loyalty program and having activity there, and then checking in for your flight. And so really at the diagnostic level, we just wanted to get buy-in from our stakeholders, run these scores, get a baseline, and figure out what those low points were. Like where are we really? Are we really at the mark that we want to be at? And so this enabled us to identify key low points with our stakeholders, so that we can go and improve that. And then what happened was we would do redesigns, we would fix some of those problems, or we would launch new features, and then we would test again. And that kind of brought us to that second tier at the programmatic level. So this is where we're starting to do more consistent benchmarking against our past scores. And this is really where you kind of pull your stakeholders in. And there's a lot of anticipation when you're running those second scores to see if it's better than the first. And in our experience here, we've done that multiple times for some of our key flows. Stakeholders, we've identified low points, changed things, ran it again, saw improvement. And so we're starting to kind of build in phase gates as well, where, stakeholders don't want to launch new flows that aren't at the previous benchmark. They want it to be better. And as Chris was saying before, we really feel like this is avoiding a lot of rework. We're putting in these phase gates, making sure that our customers are agreeing with us that these are good improvements, and that's avoiding rework down the line. And then the last stage is more around kind of using QXscore as a predictive measure. And this is based off of revenue attribution models that we can kind of, or at least we'll attempt to teach everyone today. And this is where we start to tie some key components of the QXscore, such as time on task or task success, or the QX score itself, tying those to key business metrics and using some extrapolation to try to predict future value that's delivered by design. So starting back at the foundational or diagnostic level, really how you can get started is just running a QX score for a key flow that you identify. So for us, we've done multiple workshops on this area, but this is an example of just how you can easily jump in and start setting up a QX score. We spoke with some key leaders. We found our major flows, and we decided to run one for buy a flight. And so we laid out the key flow steps. So, searching for a flight, choosing a flight, going through trip options, and then reviewing and paying for that flight. And along the way, working with our key stakeholders, we identified our top, 5 to 10 tasks that we thought were super important for our customers to be able to complete. Things like searching for trip options, knowing each of the fares, what amenities were included, what the pros and cons of each fare were, being able to identify and purchase upgrades, requesting special services like wheelchairs, and ultimately paying for that trip. And so once we've identified all that, we were able to run the test on user testing with the QX score. Customers would take the test, they would take the attitudinal questionnaire at the end, and then we would kind of get a final score for that particular flow, which kind of looked like this. So we'd get the final score. In this example, it was a 72. And we can kind of see again where performance decrement was occurring within our major flow. And for us, some of those low points were like people not being able to find a refundable fare and maybe not fully understanding how to understand fare amenities. But once we got those low points, we were able to start working with our stakeholders to improve those things, making refundable fares more easily identifiable, moving some information around, preventing errors, and then we were able to kind of run it again. which brings us to the next slide. So after we were able to identify some of those low points, we ran it again and we were kind of making these incremental improvements where over time, as you make these improvements, you can improve the score and make a stronger case for the value of UX. You're measuring this thing, you're changing the design, you're testing again, and you're showing the business that, hey, what we're doing matters because in the eyes of our customers, it's better.
Yeah.
And so moving more into the programmatic phase, which I alluded to earlier about how we start to build more consistency in this, Chris is going to run through a couple of slides on how we entered that kind of phase.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the bigger kind of more challenging transitions, right? Because the diagnostic, I think what's really great, and Lucas, you and your team have really taken it to an incredible level and have really embedded that into your process and program. And I think as you start to look at where can we go with it next, a lot of organizations that we work with, and Lucas and the team at American Airlines have already started this, is building it into the process. So obviously the diagnostic part, we're looking at task success rates. We're also looking at the attitudinal side, which is really kind of looking at the usability, right? How easy is it for somebody to use, but also the utility. Is it something that they're going to come back to? Is it something they want to use? And so now what we've seen is, and I asked this of a lot of organizations that I work with, if you had to guess what percentage of designs get passed over to the engineering team for development without any kind of testing or confirmation or validation that it is the right design. And a lot of times the responses that I get back is anywhere from 10 to 20%. I've heard a couple of people say that, maybe it's closer to 40 or 50. I've heard one or two organizations, get up to 80 or 90%, and very, very limited are testing every single design and interaction. And so a lot of times what happens is, as we've talked about, it opens up a lot of risk for rework, right? We're passing things over from a design phase to an engineering phase where we haven't really necessarily done our due diligence, or we don't know if it's actually the right experience that we need to be building for. And so as we start to think about taking that diagnostic platform as the foundation, now we can start to make comparisons. So imagine if you had 3 different designs or concepts that you wanted to put in front of your organization and ask them, is this something that we need to build or develop? Well, we can quickly and easily say, well, here's design A, B, and C, and we have our benchmark that we've already established. So in that previous example, there was a benchmark of 72, right? Maybe this one's an 80. We want to make sure now that all of our designs are at least above an 80. Otherwise, it might not really be worth our time to go through the efforts of engineering and developing a new function or new feature or widget or whatever it might be that we're building. And so using that QXscore as a threshold on a scale of 0 to 100, using it as a threshold to start and make those delineations of when is a design ready to send to the engineering team. I've heard some organizations are actually calling it like an MVP or a minimum viable prototype, right? And that's kind of where we're using that as a threshold. Now, again, one of the things that we always want to be cognizant of is as we start to go through this process in these programs is that we want to go in and actually show that we've been able to make improvements over time. And I know Lucas and team have done an exceptional job of this as well, where they've been able to take a baseline of those experiences. And as, again, we talked about building in these phase gates and programs, we might take a baseline and we're going to go mock up some new designs. Now, we might not go run this if we're moving a box 2 pixels to the left, or we're changing the hue of a color on a button. But when we are making changes and we're moving things around, it becomes vitally important to go and test and make sure that it's still going to work. And so anytime we have that baseline, we can go and run a QXscore on the new design, and we can go and just have a little bit more confidence that users can still use it and that it is an improvement on the existing experience. Now, once we have that confirmation, we have that confidence that we're making the right move. And I know a lot of product organization will use like an ICE framework or RICE framework. QXscore is really becoming part of that. And so we make those changes. We have the confidence. We know that it's going to have an impact. And now we go and launch it. And now we go and run another baseline. And now instead of our baseline being at maybe a 60, we're now at a 76 for a new baseline. So again, we're going to go make some more changes. Every organization is moving very, very quickly to obviously introduce new product evolutions. And so we're going to go run, the next time we go make some changes, we're going to run that baseline again, or that comparison of a new design against the new baseline. And again, what we're finding is that we're able to start and show the incremental increase that we're making over a period of time. And we're able to have a lot more confidence that whatever we're putting all of our resources and time and energy into, that it is the right move. Again, it's really, really cost effective to make a change in a prototype than it might be to go and make changes once you've actually engineered whatever it is that we're making a change or an improvement on. And so this is where implementing some of these gating processes can become really, really beneficial for an organization. As a product owner, a product manager, or a head of design, or even engineering and research, is we're able to start putting in, leveraging the QXscore, we're able to put in an objective measure that lets us know, are we building the right thing and are we doing it at the right time? And so again, really being able to kind of take all of these different touch points and building in a phase gate to say, look, we're not going to move this design into the development or passing it over to our engineering team until we've reached that minimum threshold. And I've even seen a lot of organizations where they say, well, it's actually the exact same as our baseline. Is it really then worth the time, energy, and effort to go through and engineer a whole new component or whatever it might be? So kind of building these phase gates can help teams be a lot more efficient. And we're also seeing that it's kind of helping to, again, flip that script, right? Instead of waiting until we've already developed a whole new whatever it is, widget or product, and then we go and look at the analytics data, right? We're really trying to move that up front so that we can be a lot more efficient with our time. Again, it's a lot more cost effective to make changes on a prototype than it is to make changes on the engineering environment. So obviously, those are kind of two from a diagnostic perspective, right? Being able to go in and say, hey, here's where things are working, here's where they're not, and just quickly identifying what maybe that bottleneck is within a larger journey, to building out programs, to putting in phase gates, to being a little bit more customer centric and driven off of when does a design go to engineering, and trying to be a lot more efficient with our engineering resources so that they're not getting bogged down with work that we don't know if it's going to work or not. But all of those things really aren't worth too much value if we can't actually show the value, right? We can benchmark and measure anything, but unless we can do something with that benchmark or measure, it's really not nearly as valuable to an organization. And so again, Lucas, I know you have some really great stories and have run a number of workshops with a number of different conferences and even internally on how do you actually take it from the diagnostics and starting to build out programs to actually building in a value to what the team is doing.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the QXscore is a great stopgap for kind of putting a metric in place that allows you to kind of speak the same language as product and kind of quantify and benchmark and share progress that UX makes on a particular flow. But as we all know, it's the bottom dollar sometimes that really counts. And so we wanted to find a way where we can take our benchmarking program to a new level by linking it to some key business metrics and trying to use QXscore more as a predictive model. And so this is a slide from some of the workshops that we've done, but it's pretty simple. You first kind of would look at your key flow. This is the same example from earlier where we're examining people picking a flight and paying for it. We kind of evaluate those tasks and look at the tasks that we have and start to think about some of the business metrics that we would kind of connect to some of these. So for example, in this slide, choosing your flight, we think that if we can help people choose a better flight or make a better suggestion for them, that we think that we can maybe increase conversion rates. And similarly, with selecting a seat, maybe if we have a better seat map and we influence people to pick a different seat or actually choose a seat instead of skipping, we'd have decreased drop-off rate. And lastly, maybe with upgrades, maybe we think that by presenting upgrades better, making them look more attractive, we could increase upsell rates. And so there's plenty of different metrics that we can examine and that you guys can think about and how we tie them back to those specific QXscore tasks. To name a few, again, increased productivity, help desk call reduction. That's really big for us, and especially in kind of more of the general industry move to self-service. We think that if UX plays a really big role in that, and that we need to make sure that customers can find where they self-serve so that we can help bring down some of the help desk calls, which would save the company money, right? And then other key common ones like conversion rate and things like that. And then we also got to start thinking about our UX metrics, as I alluded to earlier. We got to then look at our overall QX score, task success, time on task, and start to think about which tasks within the QX score relate back to those business metrics. And then we can start to think about how they relate. And I kind of talked about this earlier. Next slide. So for example, from earlier, let's focus on the one example that we looked at here in American was the refundability one. So we looked at a really low point in our QX score where customers really struggle to kind of find and make a trip refundable with only a 50% success rate. And we attached kind of increased conversion rates to that. And we thought to ourselves, hey, man, this is a really low point in our flow. How can we kind of make this better? And in return, how can we maybe bump up conversion rates by making this a better experience? And so this is where we get into creating a attribution model. And so kind of slowing things down a bit, if we start looking at our UX goal, let's say it's refundable fare, we could think as a UX team and set a reasonable goal and say, hey, we only had half of people able to complete this task effectively. Let's say we can make, the task success boosted up to 75%. And then if we look at kind of talk to our analytics team and get some more data, we can kind of start to put some more pieces in place by understanding maybe how many people are going to that particular, through our particular flow. Maybe it's several million. And then also looking at how many people maybe even click on refundable fare and how many people convert who have clicked there. And then with the money aspect, understanding, how much more money do we potentially make from selling a refundable fare? And then putting that all together, we can kind of extrapolate and say, hey, if we achieve our UX goal, we think that we might be able to make this much more money or save this much more money. And so we can start to build this value attribution over time and use QX score as a predictive factor in showing future gains. And I think Chris is going to talk a little bit about some examples next, but I don't know, Chris, did you have anything else to add to this one?
No, I think that's great. And I think, this is really where, like you said before, right, as a lot of organizations, they want to go and understand why there's a change. We can see that there's a change, but we don't really know why or how to influence that or how to make improvements. And so, I think what you've done at the American Airlines group with the team, and we're seeing this a lot more consistently, is being able to show the value, and the model and framework that you've been using is really exceptional. And I think some of the other common ones that we see, right, and I think just to clarify, these are kind of illustrative examples of this, but we usually see the most common is going to be conversion rates. How many people converted into buying a new product if you're on Amazon, or how many people converted into buying a flight, or signing up for a new credit card, or buying a vehicle, or making a payment, whatever it might be. A lot of different examples, but we're really trying to focus on conversion. And so where we're starting to see is if we can start to show in an A/B test, right, we can see what the QX scores are between those, right, and we know that there's an improvement that we've been able to make. We're trying to bring it full circle by saying, look, we were able to improve that QX score by 10 points. And ultimately what that ended up leading to was an increase of 1.1% on credit card applications, right? And if we were to say, let's say or imagine we're making $2.5 million a day on credit card interest revenue, right? That's about $27,000 incrementally a day, or $10 million. And so by being able to make applications for a new credit card a little bit more visible or easy to go through that process, or better comprehension, right, we could potentially bring an organization an extra $10 million. Call centers is another really consistent one, right? There's plenty of academic articles out there that have done research that have shown that on average, somewhere between 30 to 60%, depending on the organization, 30 to 60% of calls that go to your call center are to do with logging in, right? Whether that's resetting a password, forgetting a password, whatever it might be. But usually that's a really common one. And all the call centers can be very, very expensive. And so again, being able to use that QXscore to kind of as a diagnostic platform to identify where are the challenges and the issues, where do we see the lowest success rate, and then how do we make those changes? And now making those changes, right, as again, as an example, if we can see that 100 or 99% of participants were able to successfully find how to reset their password instead of calling, right, that could lead to a 14% increase in overall successes of them being able to self-serve a password reset. And again, using common kind of data out there, we can again do an extrapolation where we can show that by making that small little change can lead to $4.5 to $9 million a year for making a quick little usability challenge that we're able to understand through the diagnostics tool. Now, one of the really fascinating things, and this is where I think we take it to a whole nother level, is that as we start to capture our data from analytics platforms and from A/B testing, things like Adobe and Google Analytics and Quantum Metric, is that as we start to pull that data in with the database that we're pulling from QXscore, is that we can ultimately start to build out a correlation. And we can start to show how the delta or the change in QXscore can lead to conversion rate increases or lead to call center reductions, right? And so what we're doing is, again, flipping that script where we can start to say, look, why not wait? Why do we have to wait until we've actually developed it to see if it's going to work or not? But what if we can start to actually capture that data and starting to show how does the business, how do we impact or influence that business metric based on usability? And so again, Lucas, I don't know if you want to add any comments here, but this is really kind of one of those areas that is starting to take off. I think we see it across the board with UX design and product teams really having to start showing the value ahead of time. Anytime you go to ask for a budget for a program or a project, it's usually a good thing to show what the impact is going to be. But Lucas, yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else here.
Yeah, I mean, it's increasingly harder to get investment into each of these things. And if we could kind of show and ultimately say, hey, we could test these things before we go into development and, save rework and understand what our customer wants and save money in the long run, that's kind of most important for securing an investment. But I really like kind of where we're going with the predictive factor in QXscore. We're kind of going through and benchmarking key phases or key micro journeys of each phase, seeing maybe identifying kind of how much of a risk reward is there here. Do we have a really low QXscore, but a ton of people seeing this? Maybe this is an area we can invest in. So even outside of just kind of benchmarking each key flow, these are great insights for executive leaders to kind of look at the business and see where maybe their digital fronts are not performing as well, and maybe where they want to focus their strategy on for next year. And so we have really high hopes that, for each of these key flows, we can show these to leaders, get investment and potentially even more UX resources to work on these and really kind of boost these for our customers.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the great things about just being able to visualize this and being able to make those correlations is that it does help to prioritize, right? Like you said, it might be a low QXscore and we might have low business outcomes from that. But if we find out that we can increase the usability and the QXscore fractionally or marginally or however much it might need to move that business metric, right, that allows us to start to prioritize what projects and programs do we need to take. I've worked with plenty of organizations where they found that, by making some improvements, it really wasn't going to have an impact at all. And that's another positive outcome, right? Because now we're not wasting resources on something that otherwise wouldn't actually make an impact to the bottom line. And so all in all, when we think about everything that we've been discussing today, right, really we're starting to see a lot of interest and a lot of organizations are starting to try and flip the script, right? And we found that QXscore is one of the mechanisms to do that. And so again, when we think about how do we actually make improvements and how do we bring the customers front and center and how do we have a little bit more confidence when we're making these decisions, right? We're seeing it at the diagnostic level where we're able to come in and we're able to say, look, here's an experience or a journey that we might see. Here's all the different success rates and here's how people feel about it, the attitudinal side. And we're able to quickly identify and isolate where there might be bottlenecks within that journey and really understanding the why behind it. Then we start to build it into a program where we say, look, this design might not be ready to go. let's wait one more week, because if we wait another week and we can make those changes because it didn't meet a threshold, we're going to save X% or in exponential amount as we go down that development process. So if we can catch it early, we save our time, or we save our resources, we save our time, we prevent a lot of rework. And then also introducing those phase gates gives us a little bit more of a benchmark to help potentially remove some of those subjective conversations or those opinions when you're in the room deciding, is this ready to go or is it not? Or is this the right thing to even be building or making an impact on? And so building in a framework to allow us to use a little bit more data up front on the different concepts and on those designs can build a lot more confidence in the organization. And then finally, as we talked about, right, it's great to do benchmarks and we can benchmark anything, but really what's going to help drive a lot of the impact and the change and help to increase the chances or increase the budgets that you're going to be getting for programs and projects and redesigns and really improving those products. But being able to use that as kind of a predictive measure where we can start to say, look, we have the data, we have the information, we can show you through concepts very, very quickly. We want to make these changes to the design and or spin up a quick prototype. And we can go and show what that increase in that improvement is going to be over a period of time because we have all of that data for us. And so really what I think Lucas has been doing an exceptional job with the organization at American Airlines, and it's been a lot of fun working with Lucas and the team, is really trying to just flip that script. Let's not wait until we've gone through the process to develop something and build it to go and see if it's going to work or not, but using the tools that we have at hand and the measures and the metrics and the systems that we can put in place to go and make those changes and to get that data way earlier in the product development lifecycle so that we can avoid a costly rework, we can avoid wasted resources, and we can have a lot more confidence in what we build. So thank you everyone for listening. I know there's a couple questions in there. So happy to start taking those. And I guess Lucas, is there anything else that you wanted to
add? No, I just think the complete story is that, utilizing the QXscore and inserting it, integrating into the product development cycle, saves on rework, diagnoses key problems, and even helps make predictions for future gains for your company. And really looking forward to continuing work with user testing and to build out these attribution models and kind of securing the spotlight for UX and showing that we are saving money or making money for the company with what we do. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, both of you, Chris and Lucas, for driving us through all of this. It's really helpful to hear, and especially Lucas, just to hear how you're putting it into practice at American Airlines. I think that's especially helpful. So yeah, thank you to both of you. For everybody else out there, yes, there are some questions that have already been coming in the Q&A. If you have more questions, load them up there. I want to take at least a little bit of time to go through your questions. One that I'm going to start with, and this could be for either one of you, but, I think there probably are a lot of people here that, are hearing about QXscore, maybe even for the first time, and like what they're hearing. But what's the best way to get started? If you like what you hear, you're saying, all right, this makes a lot of sense. I think we should probably go in this direction. What's my next step? What's the first step, I suppose? So maybe we'll start with that question. How do you get started if you do want to get started with QXscore?
Well, yeah, I was going to say shameless plug for user testing. Got to have the algorithm and the methodology first, but that's the easy part. I think what Lucas has done at American Airlines is like getting, helping, you're talking about change management. And so Lucas, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about like just the socializing and kind of anytime you introduce a new metric, we work in we work in a world where there is an abundance of metrics and data points and all kinds of different systems. But, Lucas, maybe a little bit of, how have you been able to kind of socialize and get the adoption and awareness?
Yeah. I think just running your first test and having results handy to kind of show the value is super important. But when we kind of bring those results into the stakeholders for the first time and kind of introduce this whole topic, right? We really highlight some of the metrics that they were currently using, like NPS or likely to recommend, and we go in and explain why we should be looking at both the behavioral and the attitudinal components on both sides, and how both of them as a hybrid create this much more of a solid score metric to go off of. And so just explaining that difference has kind of turned some heads. And then once you get into kind of showing them their product, especially stakeholders who hold like their flows near and dear, once you start showing what customers are thinking or actually doing on the site, it kind of irks them a little bit. And then there's anticipation at the end for what the QX score is going to actually be. And once they see it, it's like almost like grade school. It's like, oh, we got a C or we got a B. I want to improve myself. And so that really starts to get them thinking like, okay, how do I improve? And just having those insights handy from the QX score makes them want to adopt it, because it's kind of this direction that they've been always looking for, but didn't necessarily know existed. And so just coming prepped with explanations of the score and the results immediately is really helped gain traction here.
That's really helpful to know. Thanks, Lucas.
Yeah. And I think that's the one thing you said of like, it gives you a grade and it gives you a score. It gives you something aspirational to try and hit and to reach. And that's the one thing I've noticed with a lot of the product owners, product managers that I've worked with over the years, and including UX research and design and leaders, is I think it kind of simplifies it, right? Again, NPS, we've kind of seen some challenges and issues there. And again, if we're just looking at a single metric, but being able to just put something like that is really comprehensive. And it allows us to go, okay, well, why is it an 87 compared to an 83? We have all that data there to be able to go and say, well, it's an 83 because task number 3, which is where we asked people to go and like reset their password, we only saw 20% of people could actually do it. So let's go make that change. And it's really, really simple to go ahead and find those opportunities to make the improvement.
Yeah, appreciate that. See, we have time for a couple more questions. This is a question actually about sort of what's under the hood, so to speak. The question is, they know it's proprietary, but trying to get a sense of the sophistication of analytics informing the score. I don't know, I don't know if there's an easy way to talk about how, what informs the QX score, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty straightforward. And I think really what it is it's a combination, like we said, of the two different kind of sides, right? It's the attitudinal side, which is effectively an iteration of like SUS or Super Q, where we're looking at likelihood to recommend, we're looking at ease of use, we're looking at trust and credibility. And then what we're doing is we're taking all of the success rates. Now we have a way to weight all of that stuff on the back end, and we're basically, we're using a top 2 box methodology for the attitudinal side. But what we're doing is we're taking both sides of that data, again, weighting it all, and then in the platform itself, it's giving you that single metric. So it's really not that complex, but it also provides a lot of really, like, it's not that sophisticated necessarily to understand, but it provides a really, really great measure that has that good balance of what people feel and what they're saying about it, which we often know what people say and what people do are two different things. And then it's also capturing what they do. And so you're able to kind of capture both sides of that. So I know, I think I saw John had asked about that. And I hope one of those slides, we kind of showed what the actual output is and what it looks like. Hopefully that kind of helped give a better sense of it, but always happy to have a deeper dive into the nuances of it all.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that. Maybe one last audience question here, which was, the question was asking if QX score is better suited for new product development or for existing products that need modernization, consolidation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Lucas, I don't know if you have an experience on kind of both sides. I want to speak to it.
Yeah. I think it could be suited for both. For new product development, it's really nice. And I think you could really focus on that rework section, because you're putting something out there for the first time. I'm sure you're going to have ideation, you're going to have discovery research that goes into it. And then you're going to probably build some prototypes. You could run the QX score on those prototypes and see kind of what you're working with for the first time at a baseline level. And if you're happy with it, great, push it to development. If not, you haven't built anything yet. And so you really can go back and rework things. And because it's also new, you're probably not dealing with a lot of feasibility issues as far as like the dev team can't build this or that, or they can't make changes to a legacy system, right? So I feel like you're really going to be in a powerful position doing QXscore on a new product. But again, also for older products, it's also awesome. Like you can kind of, especially for like going in and saying like, and kind of justifying rework, right? You go in there, you audit kind of your legacy flows, and you can understand where you're at and where this new feature might put you on the scale. So I really do feel like you can do it with both. And I think there was like a second half of that question, if I'm reading it correctly, about backend processes like API performance or data accuracy.
Yeah, there the whole separate question, which is, yeah, like how can it account for whether it's API performance, data accuracy, some of those back end processes? Yeah, if you're up for it, that'd be great to cover that too.
I was going to dish that one off to Chris, actually.
I was hoping you were going to answer it. No, I think, yeah. So normally for backend, like we're not so much focused with like uptime or downtime or responsiveness. Now, all of those have an impact on the customers and the user's experience. But really, when we think about it, like, because the mechanisms and the way that we're delivering this, usually to be able to look at more, call it performance, right? Those instances and those times that there might not be the performance that we're looking for, like the 99.99% uptime, and we're trying to find that 0.001% of downtime, to be able to run that. So all of this is solicited feedback, right? So participants know that they're taking part in this it's effectively a survey on steroids or a usability test on steroids, right? And so participants are taking part in this. They're actively aware and acknowledging that they're taking part in this. And so usually for those kind of research engagements, we're talking sample sizes of a couple hundred. Usually to go and look at performance and things like that, we're talking about thousands and thousands of participants, again, to try and find that 0.001% of downtime or latency. So it's really not going to be used for like a backend performance. Now, if you wanted to talk about like, maybe kind of looking at like broken links or, does this API work? We're working with a couple AI organizations where we're kind of looking at, more just generally like, how are you even using it? What are the prompts that you're putting in? Why are you trying to use the system or platform? So there's a lot of different applications. I think a lot of it is going to be front end. It's mostly going to have to do with, being able to go and find different areas within the product, being able to use it, which, usability, and then utility, which is, do we want to use it? Does it provide something that is functional that we're going to continue to come back and use repeatedly on whatever scale that is?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Why? I know we're pretty much at the end of our time here. So first of all, Chris and Lucas, I just want to thank you for taking all the time to walk us through everything and then staying along for questions too. So thank you for that. If there are questions that maybe we didn't get a chance to get to or questions that come up later, Chris, might I be able to share, maybe point them in the direction, maybe share your info and LinkedIn, whatever it might be, to kind of continue the conversation?
Yeah. Happy to have all that information shared out. Happy to find me on LinkedIn, email. Lucas as well. Lucas has got a lot of really great stories from the trenches, and has been working on this program for a couple of years now, and it's a lot of fun to work with him as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have those conversations and dialogues, and really appreciate everyone's time today and just for the opportunity from the Product Collective and Mike for helping to coordinate this. It's been a great time.